Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice, no sugarcoating, no platitudes, no bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating the same old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Welcome back, listeners. Have you ever seen something on the internet that pissed you off so much that you immediately went to a comment section and then got in a war with a stranger that you don't even know? Part of my ongoing recovery has been that I try not to do that these days. However, I've also made this mistake that I'm in like 5 or 6 therapy or therapist groups on Facebook, and I get myself angry all the time interacting with other therapists. But at least these days, usually I don't even really respond. I just read something and I'm like, wow, there are a lot of sick people in this profession. But what started the content for this episode today is that back around December or January, a peer from AA sent me a video of a well-known therapist influencer talking about politics and therapists and the kind of clients that clinicians should supposedly be challenging. And I was so angry when I watched this that thankfully these days my first reaction is that if I see a reaction in me, I don't say anything or do anything. I just pause and just notice how pissed off I am. And then I don't fire back right away. I just sit with like, why has this irritated me so badly? And then I asked her, what were you hoping to accomplish by sending me this? Or what was your intention with sending me this? And she said something to the effect of, yeah, I just think that like therapy or that politics doesn't really belong in the therapy room. And to some extent, I agree. Some extent. So that's what I'm going to kind of talk about today. But this influencer, he's a therapist influencer who recently was canceled because he's quite controversial. In fact, I think part of my frustration was that when I watched this video, I went immediately to the comments section hoping to see like one clinical hesitation or one dissenting thing or one person maybe asking a question, any kind of disagreement, some question about whether therapists should maybe even be publicly talking about broad groups and labeling all the people together under one thing with open contempt for groups of people and then saying that that is ethical clarity. And there was not a single thing. There was thousands of people clapping, applause, therapists congratulating the sentiment, saying thank you for saying everything that I feel in my heart, people treating political contempt as professional courage. Nobody seemed concerned that a clinician with a massive millions plus audience was modeling the exact posture that we should be careful about in the room, which is deciding who somebody is and having contempt for that person before even becoming curious about how they got there. And so this stayed with me for months, partly because it irritated me, which thankfully I messaged this to another therapist that I know in California. And I was just like, can you just give me your thoughts on this? And he wrote back, he's like, bro, it's rage bait. Like, what do you expect? Of course, this is rage bait. Then as I did some more research, unquestionably, this person is a internet provocateur that's what he builds his platform on, is pissing people off by sloppily black and white labeling stuff when hopefully all of us know that like human beings are incredibly complex. There is a lot of nuance, and this, I suppose, revealed for me something very ugly about online therapy culture. And partly because the same public therapy world that rewards hot takes now seems to be repeatedly shocked if a therapist influencer crosses the line. Like this same guy recently, I don't know if canceled is the right word, but he recently pissed off a lot of people or created some controversy for himself by saying, hey, if you're a rapist, maybe there should be like a phone line that you can call if you feel like you're rapey. And obviously that did not go over very well. A lot of people challenging that, you know, he's softening the need for accountability. That part is neither here nor there. Where I want to go with this is that therapists are human beings. Of course, we have values, have political beliefs, our own histories, our own wounds, biases, and moral commitments. And any therapist claiming that you are a full blank slate is just selling fantasy. That's complete horseshit. But the job is to know what we are bringing into the room well enough that our material does not take over a client's work. So this therapist in the same video, he says like, I would challenge the fuck out of a conservative client. I'm going to put you in your place. And I was like, man, I don't know if that is like, you have already front loaded so much contempt for someone that you haven't even met. Tell me how you could possibly be neutral if you have decided that you are disgusted with them as a human being before you have even heard anything about them. The therapy room requires disciplined curiosity, and social media punishes this discipline because online, having any kind of certainty performs. Rage performs. Like, you piss enough people off and get enough comments, the algorithm keeps recycling that, like, ooh, look at this. People are pissed at this, or people are commenting on this. Having moral clarity performs. So when you go to the Grammys and you tell, you know, however many people are, is it Grammys or Emmys? I don't even know. But when Billie Eilish let everybody know that she thinks that nobody is illegal on stolen land, like, moral clarity performs. People love stuff like that. People with fast takes and satisfying tribes win. A therapist can build an entire brand by saying charged stuff, getting applause, and presenting it like it's good clinical insight. And I'm going to take the place or the argument that in therapy, this kind of posturing is very dangerous. A client is not a comment section. They're not a political mascot, not a stand-in for everything that you hate about culture. A client is somebody with a biography, fear, attachment patterns, family history, class context, religious influence or wounds, trauma exposure, media diet. If somebody's spending 16 hours on their phone, doom scrolling, of course, this is going to shape identity, resentment, who they are loyal to. They might have shame, grief, unfinished thinking. And if you slap a label on that with no curiosity, then I don't think that you are doing good therapy. Now, any clinician is probably going to still use language of ethics, safety, harm, validation, and accountability, but the room is contaminated if a therapist has decided ahead of time which clients deserve suspicion or that they have already labeled a client as a certain way. Now, this field has values, every helping profession does: human dignity, reducing suffering, ethical care, consent, accountability, respect for difference. All of those things are important, and those commitments are at the center of what being a therapist is. Therapy requires the ability to sit with human complexity, including political complexity. Human beings rarely arrive in the room well organized into clean moral categories. A person could support strict immigration enforcement and still care about immigrants, or they could care about law enforcement because of their own experience with violence or instability or institutional collapse. And another person might fear those same systems because of direct harm or being discriminated or a family history. And a therapist can provide affirming and respectful care while still believing that complex conversations about identity, sex, family, religion, culture, and policy require more than slogans. They require dignity, curiosity, clinical responsibility, and careful attention to the person that's sitting right in front of you. Therapy becomes dangerous if a clinician has decided beforehand which category represents virtue and which one is contamination. Therapy is one of the remaining places where people should be able to bring psychologically loaded material without immediately feeling like they are being sorted into an ideological camp. A conservative client should be able to speak without wondering if a therapist thinks that they are oppressive, and a progressive client should also be able to speak without wondering if the therapist dismisses their fears and lived experience. A religious client should be able to talk about conviction, which without being treated as primitive. A police officer should be able to talk about their service, maybe their biases and their trauma without being reduced to a symbol. And a gay client should be able to talk about their fear, family, identity, grief, anger, or having to educate other people just to defend their humanity. A therapist's responsibility is larger than being political and being sorted into a certain tribe. The responsibility is to remain capable of curiosity if a client's worldview differs from your own. And if you are recording a video publicly for millions of people saying basically that you can't stand a tribe of people, you're alienating nearly half of the country. Having values does not require dragging every personal judgment into the room. A therapist can believe in human dignity, honesty, nonviolence, consent, accountability, respect for differences, while suspending an immediate urge to sort somebody into a moral category. That suspending of your own judgment is part of the discipline of this work. Gives a therapist enough room to ask, what function does this belief serve? Or what fear is underneath this? Or what experience has shaped this belief? Where is it helping this person to currently function? Where might it be damaging their relationships or damaging judgment or their capacity to live honestly with who they actually are? And having clinical restraint does not mean moral emptiness or bankruptcy. It is the ability to keep a client's material and the client's life at the center of the session instead of making it a referendum on your worldview. Therapists should absolutely have values, but you should also have limits. A therapist should absolutely challenge if they are hearing cruelty or if they are seeing avoidance, deception, entitlement, or harmful behavior. The challenge should come from a client's actual life and functioning rather than your need to correct somebody's political identity. And I have seen how quickly this kind of sorting can happen from a client side. Several years ago, a client found an old public voter registration record of mine and came into a session hot, wanting to make the entire hour about what that meant to me. That from one data point that he read while Googling me from like 10 years ago when I lived in Illinois at that point or something, and he had built an entire story around who I was and my beliefs, my values, my ethics, and what I must be secretly supporting. Well, so now with a podcast, I think most people, you could do enough research and kind of get a take for who I am. But at this point, all of that didn't even exist. And this accusation was so extreme and disconnected from who I am. And frankly, bizarre, given the fact that I'm gay myself, and I'm very open about that. But that moment stayed with me because it showed how fast political categorization can replace actual contact with the human being that's in front of you. And this client was responding to a symbol or a color created by the internet rather than a person in the room with them. And that is exactly what therapy should be slowing down. The work required returning the focus back to the room and what was happening between that client and I, what fears popped up for him or what anger became activated, what assumptions were being made about me, and how quickly his mind had turned a helping person in front of him into a political object instead of a human being. And this is the same discipline that therapists need in any direction, no matter what your worldview is. And part of this, so also going back to this influencer, this therapist influencer, there are other therapists that I really look up to or have learned from. And when I saw their comments also in these comment sections, I was like, man, I was just a little bit surprised, or I guess I learned a lot from all of that. We cannot ask clients to examine their projection, distortion, fears, all or nothing thinking, while then refusing to examine those exact same processes in ourselves. I don't need my clients to share the same politics, background, sexuality, religion, life experiences, or conclusions for me to be able to work with them seriously. I just need enough honesty in the room to understand what their beliefs are doing for them, where those beliefs came from, and whether those beliefs are helping or harming the life that they say that they want. Now, if I'm hearing anything from a client that includes cruelty, harassment, dehumanization, destructive behavior, any of those things are unquestionably going to be challenged as soon as I hear it. I challenge avoidance, dishonesty, rigidity, aggression, self-deception, any of those things all the time. Challenge is part of what makes therapy helpful when it serves a client's growth and functioning. The concern is a preloaded challenge, like this therapy Jeff saying, I would challenge the fuck out of a conservative. Hold on a second, man. You have decided already that you cannot stand this person and you're going to challenge them and you're angry with them. And I think that preloaded anger really deserves some examination because it reveals a posture that can contaminate your clinical work before that person has even said anything. I mean, imagine hearing the reverse. I would challenge the fuck out of a progressive client. Most therapists would hear that and go, holy shit, man, that is pretty hostile. They would understand how alienating that could be to progressive clients listening to a therapist publicly announce an aggressive stance toward people who are not like them. So this same standard should apply in both directions. That's not that people should not have a political viewpoint, but you shouldn't be shoving anything down anybody's throat. Political contempt does not belong anywhere in a therapy room. Once a therapist has publicly framed one identity as challenge-worthy and another as not, the room changes before therapy has even begun, because a conservative client might start to self-monitor, a moderate client might hear something and then kind of become guarded, like they can or can't say certain parts. Maybe a religious client would hear that and wonder which parts of themselves they have to leave outside of the room. Perhaps a veteran or a police officer, let's say a police officer who worked in a really bad area, repeatedly had experiences with minorities that then had shifted this person's worldview or had developed a bias that was maybe not a helpful bias for them to happen. Are you going to attack this person right away without even getting curious about how did we get where we got? You can't be helpful to somebody if you have front-loaded contempt and anger and disgust with them. When I teach the skill of suspending judgment to clients, so I mean, this is something that I try to practice for myself, but a lot of times I also will teach clients to try to practice this in their own lives. Because let's say, for example, if you're a parent and you have a kid that is doing something that upsets you, smoking weed or something like that, if you come out hot, attacking and screaming and shaming, you're probably, well, maybe it might compel change, but more likely than anything, you are probably going to have that person start to develop secrecy, that now they are withholding information from you so that you don't have that response. So I use this example when I am teaching this with clients. I've worked with a few clients who were sexual offenders or sexual offenders on minors, and I ask a client to think for a moment. Just imagine, as hard as it might be, imagine that if you were a sexual offender and had committed a crime on a child and you were seeking help, if the helper, when you were talking about things, had a face that said disgust and contempt, would you ever be able to be honest about that, ever? Of course you wouldn't. And so this truly is a skill to be able to control your, to suspend your own judgment, to suspend your own values, and to have awareness of your body language and your face, because a client can read disgust on your face the same way that even if you're not a therapist, if you have an extreme view or if you have a conviction about anything, just know people can see it on your face if you are disgusted. And most of the time, people do not respond well to disgust, especially if all they're doing is sharing something that's honest about themselves. So that part is worth just like sitting with and thinking about. Be aware of how your body language and your face impacts people. Clients are sensitive to contempt. All of us are sensitive to contempt, and they can feel it quickly. Even subtle contempt can change the emotional safety of a room, because a therapist could sound grounded and calm and empathetic, regulated and professional, but if your face says, I'm judging you and I'm disgusted that you just said that, now the client might feel inferior or unenlightened or unsafe, and they will never open that part up honestly again. So part of my invitation here for you is, if you notice any kind of a reaction internally for yourself, whether that is something that clashes with your worldview or your sexuality, your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, any of that stuff, be aware first of the reaction, and then also do a body scan and just be aware. Look at, like, are your hands clenched up? Did your body tense up? Does your face say disgust? Because somebody else is probably reading that faster than you're even aware that you're doing it. If my microphone sounds different, it's because I started recording this at like 5 a.m. and now I'm done seeing clients today, and it's 8 o'clock and I'm continuing on. Also, man, I have told people I'm going to really make an effort to cut these podcasts down so that they are not so long, because I know the attention span for most people is like 15, 20 minutes. And here I am at 25 minutes and I'm not even halfway through my outline. A girl's got a lot to say, I guess. So pause here if you'd like. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going. So moving into, there is professional risk if therapists become too certain that their own political framework means that you are the representative of what psychological health looks like. And a degree does not remove tribal psychology. One might think that for all of these therapists that have some knowledge of dialectics and how two things can be true at the same time, two things that may sound like they are opposites can be true at the same time, yet this seems to be missing when they are recording their shorts or when they are praising another therapist for like openly attacking political groups in comments. And all or nothing is never helpful. Any registered intern, any therapist 101 going from therapist aid online worksheet can tell you about the cognitive distortion of black and white thinking. So why does this disappear with some therapists when they get on podcasts or on YouTube shorts that they have washed something into all one way or all something else, safe or unsafe? Either you're affirming or you're harmful. You're privileged or you're oppressive. Things exist on a spectrum, and binary sorting is terrible for clinical work. It collapses human complexity into slogans, and then ethics, I think, kind of dissipates or disappears inside that. So you can have convictions and beliefs and still try to be curious about how somebody got where they did. Hopefully, if you are a practicing therapist, or if you're just a listener trying to grow, you can disagree with somebody and still try to understand them. You can challenge a belief without turning somebody into an enemy. You can hold a moral line around not harming other people while still slowing things down and trying to understand what is organizing somebody's beliefs. And looking at the rest of this outline, I've decided I think that's a good place to cut this off because I'm moving into a different topic and this will be 50 minutes or an hour. So I should have just recorded the whole thing before I went to work and then it wouldn't have sounded all weird. But guess what? This is not like some super professional podcast, nor is it like somebody podcasting out of a basement either. I mean, I don't have an intense or great setup here. It's just a MacBook and a mic and a tired 40-year-old who knows a thing or two about a thing or two, but not about everything. So with that, let's call it there. Hopefully some takeaways. Can you remain curious about a person whose worldview irritates, scares, offends, or challenges you? If you're not a therapist, that's a great growing place. And if you are a therapist, do better. Can I tell the difference between clinically useful challenges or my own contempt looking for permission to speak? Can I stay anchored in somebody else's actual life, relationships, functioning, and their goals before turning their beliefs into a symbol? These are important questions because the therapy room depends on a level of discipline that social media does not reward. In fact, that's where I'm going to end that because I wanted to go into therapist influencers. Some of them tick me off, and so I'm going to bitch about that in another episode. But once a therapist loses their discipline, therapy becomes less about understanding the person that is in front of you and more about sorting people into categories that you have already decided are acceptable or unacceptable, and that's not good work. So what kind of clients or what kind of people activate quick judgments in you before they have even fully told their story. I can think of a handful of clients that I have had, because I'm human. I have biases, that I have read someone's intake stuff and I have already decided from reading that I'm like, this person is this way, right? That's just a natural, normal thing that happens. That's not pathological. That is called a heuristic. It's a mental shortcut that exists in the brain where we make a fast judgment before analyzing every detail. So the work is not for you to say that you don't have any biases. That's bullshit. That's part of how we are wired, is rapid pattern recognition based on your prior experience, emotional memory, bias, threat detection, and available information. So stop it. Everybody does that. That's a totally normal thing. But instead, ask or just notice, are you doing that? Is it a heuristic, and is there more that you need to explore? Next, where do your political, religious, cultural, or moral assumptions make curiosity harder? I know that one for me is that I have some spiritual wounds, and sometimes I can be very quick to make a judgment about somebody if they come from a religious tradition that was once harmful to me, or that people from that religious tradition were harmful to me. But the work, again, is to pause and recognize this person is not the same thing as who or what harmed me 20 years ago. If you do see something harmful, if you do see bad behavior in front of you, can you challenge that without demonizing the person and then turning them into a representative of everything that you think that you dislike? And I think these last two questions only really for maybe therapists or other sort of helping professions, but do your clients experience you as clinically honest, or as someone who is auditioning them for agreement? Because that is not helpful. And if you have a public persona, if you have a podcast, if you have whatever, do you make room for complex people, or are you teaching people that they need to be guarded before they have even said a word? And all of those are some good questions for you to think about yourself and how you show up, and knowing how you show up and how you carry yourself and how much room you make for other people. That is doing the work. And I'll gripe about influencers another episode, so stay tuned. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to people around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we're all capable of growing past that. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. I'll see you on the next one.